Hi, good evening. Welcome along to the Transfer Show. It's 5 o'clock and we're here to take you through everything that's happening on day 3 of this early summer window. There's one more week for the clubs to get their deals done. And although the window has been opened to accommodate the sides at the Club World Cup, remember, every club can do business. Well, Manchester United are all about the rebuild this summer, and their captain is staying put to be part of the new era. We'll hear all about Bruno Fernandes turning down Saudi, and in our 7 o'clock show, we'll hear from the man himself. Jadon Sancho is returning to Manchester United. He couldn't agree a deal with Chelsea, and they're paying £5 million to send him back to Old Trafford. We'll hear why, and look at what's next for him. And like most recent transfer windows, Chelsea are getting busy. Today they're being linked with one of Europe's best goalkeepers. We'll have all of that and more for you right here on The Transfer Show. And James Savundra and Mark McAdam are our transfer experts tonight. Let's start then with Bruno Fernandes, gentlemen. A lot of money for him not to go to Manchester United. James, what do you think?
A lot of money. He had the opportunity to potentially
not to leave Manchester
triple
United.
His salary, didn't he? The opportunity to potentially earn somewhere near £750,000 a week if reports are to be believed to join Al Hilal. But he's decided he wants to remain in the top competition in Europe, in the Premier League. That's where he wants to stay. And you can understand why. He's only 30 years of age. He turns 31 in September. The argument was, with the season that Manchester United had, would he want to stay there based on what they achieved, finishing 15th in the Premier League table, a disappointing performance in the Europa League final as well. But having had a conversation with his family, he's decided he wants to stay put. There were some really interesting quotes from last summer when he signed this new contract at Manchester United, which takes him up to 2027 with an option to extend until 2028. He said, "I wouldn't have signed this deal if I didn't believe my best moments in the United shirt are still to come. I can see how positive the future is going to be, and I'm relishing leading this team forward." Let's bear in mind what he's done in the United shirt this season. There is an argument, if Bruno Fernandes wasn't there, if he wasn't fit this season, things could look even worse for Manchester United this year. The fans love him. 82% of fans voted him their player of the year this season. He was stunning at times for Manchester United. He couldn't quite get them that silverware to make this season a success. But it's a really encouraging statement for Ruben Amorim, for Ineos as well, that the captain wants to stay, that he believes in the project. Clearly, he believes United can get back to the level. I think there's an ego that Bruno Fernandes has. Players want to join United still because they have that ego believing that they can take this club back to where they were, where they're supposed to be. I think it's really encouraging that he's clearly feeling vindicated in that decision, and he's feeling that United are doing the right things in this summer window. He's encouraged.
James, there's a but, and it's a big but, Mark, because £100 million could have gone a long way to rebuilding Manchester United. Do you think everyone at Old Trafford is delighted that Fernandes is staying?
I think ultimately this was a commercial decision and a footballing decision, and the footballing decision has won. But I think those in the commercial part of Manchester United would have said, like, this is a big deal here, this is a lot of money. The accountants would have been happy. That would have been a huge chunk towards rebuilding Manchester United over the course of this summer for someone who's in their 30s. But he's a leader, he's a captain, he's someone that's been so instrumental to Manchester United over the course of the last few years. And like James says, without him, where would they be? And I think if you were to ask honestly the hierarchy of Manchester United, what would you like in this situation? They'd probably be split, with some saying time to get rid because we're never going to recoup that type of money for a 30-plus-year-old. The others will be saying we need him as a part of our rebuild, because if we don't have someone like him on the pitch, how are we going to perform? We need these young players to learn from someone with his passion and experience. And I think that would have been very similar with the fan base as well. But ultimately, this has been about football. And Manchester United are now going to have to find other ways to regenerate this squad without £100 million in the back pocket from this man.
That was going to be my next point, James. Amorim says we're getting the money from elsewhere. Where?
Well, you look at the wide attacking players they have right now, players that are returning from their loan spells. Anthony had a successful loan spell at Real Betis. Marcus Rashford impressed in spells at Aston Villa before his season ended early due to injury. Alejandro Garnacho, what's his future? There's reports elsewhere that Ruben Amorim's already told him to go and find a club this summer. There's plenty of money there potentially for United. Jadon Sancho could be another player they'll sell in this window. I think they could have got potentially £100 million for a 30-year-old. They'd never have thought when he signed that contract last summer they'd get money for him. I think when they signed that contract for 4 years, there was acceptance that he probably wouldn't be any resale value at the end of that contract, that he would stay at this club for those 4 years. There are players they can sell, whether or not they can command fees of somewhere near 80 to 100 million pounds for any of those other players. I don't think they can. There's clearly things they can do around pure profit with academy graduates. I know that's not what Manchester United fans want to hear when you talk about players like Garnacho and Kobbie Mainoo, but there are players there to be sold. But of course, if you sold Bruno Fernandes for 100 million pounds, then that gives you a huge amount of wiggle room to do even more in this transfer window. But saying that, he's going to stay put, and I think that is really encouraging for Manchester United and Ineos. It's been a dreadful season. I was speaking on this show a year ago, and there was so much encouragement about what Manchester United did last summer. They backed Erik ten Hag. We saw what happened. Things went wrong there. But I think the start of this transfer window for Matheus Cunha to commit his future to Manchester United, for Bruno Fernandes, the captain, to commit his future, that can only be a good thing. Important to note as well that United never actually had a decision to make because there wasn't a concrete bid that came in from Al Hilal. What they would have done, we wait to see. Well, we won't find out, but what they would have done, it would have been fascinating because I think it would have been a dagger blow to lose the captain, I think.
OK.
Just one quick word on that. So, obviously, Al Hilal playing in the Club World Cup, they wanted a big marquee signing. They thought it might be this man. It's not going to be this man, but they're going to get Simone Inzaghi, the man that just took Inter Milan to the Champions League final. So, plan B, a big hitter, but the head coach.
Yeah, much more on Inzaghi coming up after 5:30. Right, James just mentioned there that they've got Cunha over the line. Bryan Mbeumo wants to go to Manchester United. Now, explain something to me. They've had a dreadful season. They appear to be in disarray off the pitch with cuts and whatever. What's the appeal of Manchester United?
I think we've seen over the last 24 hours, Bruno Fernandes could have gone and got £750,000 rumoured per week. He's decided to stay on what he's on at Manchester United. He's turned down the big money. Matheus Cunha had loads of options in the Premier League and across Europe because of the release clause. He's decided to go to Manchester United. With all that recent history of that club not performing, they still have a huge pull for players, regardless of no European football. And I guess when you look at this man, Bryan Mbeumo, been absolutely outstanding since he joined Brentford in 2019, and he had options on the table from other clubs playing in the Champions League, and he again looks to have decided Manchester United is where my future lies. Now, I think that shows just the pull that the club has. To go into the detail of this particular deal, now, Brentford have the option of 1 year plus a further year on his contract. No release clause, but they believe the way he's performed since he arrived in 2019, 200 plus appearances, around 70 goals, he's earned the right to move on. He's earned the right to play for a big club. He's earned the right to prove himself at the highest level. Now, whilst they don't want to lose him, they accept he has given everything for Brentford whilst he's been there. So therefore, they are happy to listen to offers, those that they feel reflect the value of the player, which we understand to be around £60 million. There's been no club-to-club talk at this stage, but there is a confidence that Bryan Mbeumo wants to join Manchester United. And normally, when the player says the right noises publicly about, well, this is the right opportunity for me, it's only a matter of time before you get to the formality of the two clubs speaking. So that's the situation there. We know that this is one potentially to happen, but it's just a matter of time. And that will be a big part of what Manchester United are doing, that rebuild, and in particular having two number 10s, which is what Ruben Amorim wants. And you can imagine Matheus Cunha, Bryan Mbeumo, that could be very dangerous.
James, great signing if they get that over the line.
He's been remarkable this season. 20 Premier League goals he scored for a club like Brentford, and Wissa deserves immense credit as well. So does Thomas Frank for getting the very best out this player. I think there'd have been times that it was the BMW, wasn't it, with Ben Rama and Watkins, but it felt this man didn't quite get the move. He didn't get the limelight. It was the other players that did, but he deserves that now. He's probably surpassed what the likes of Ivan Toney have done in a Brentford shirt. When you look at what they've achieved this season, what a statement it would be for Manchester United. They can bring in Matheus Cunha and Bryan Mbeumo, two of the most impressive attacking players in the Premier League this season, to the club in June. There's still plenty of time to go in this transfer window, but for those two to be there through the door for the first day of pre-season, what a statement of intent that is, what a sign that is. We're back in Ruben Amorim here. Right,
we touched on Jadon Sancho just a moment ago, but I want to get into this because on the surface, Mark, it looks like Chelsea are going, here, £5 million, you can have him back. Explain why it's not that simple.
Yeah, Manchester United could have potentially a little problem on their hands with a number of players that they actually don't really want at the football club this summer, so therefore they need to shift him on. Their thinking would have been, right, he's gone to Chelsea, no problem there. The contractual situation was it was an obligation if Chelsea finished higher than 14th in the Premier League, that they had to purchase Jadon Sancho for £25 million. They can get out of that by paying £5 million to Manchester United, which we believe is what they're going to do. Now, there was no loan fee attached to this contract, to this situation. So essentially what they're doing is paying a £5 million loan fee and sending him back. But there was no loan fee at the beginning of this. So it's an interesting one to look at, because on the surface you think, hang on a second. Now, there were conversations between Jadon Sancho's representatives and those people at Chelsea, but he has to fit in to their wage structure. Now, there are reports he's earning around £250,000 to £300,000 a week, which wouldn't fit into what Chelsea are doing. So therefore, go back to Manchester United. Unfortunately, we can't find some common ground with your wages, and therefore we'll pay the fine or the fee, the £5 million fee, and that's where we are with it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. This man, no question, played big games for Chelsea, started the Europa Conference League final, was a big part of that squad, ended up with some silverware, interest from Europe. I'm sure someone will come knocking.
Will they, though, James? Because, as you said, it's got a bit congested of the players that United don't want. Anthony, Rashford, Sancho. So what's next?
I think it's certainly a problem that Manchester United could have dealt with out this summer. I think when they bid farewell to him last summer, there was a real hope that this deal and this chapter would come to a close for Manchester United, because it simply hasn't worked out. United spending more than £70 million to bring Jadon Sancho to the football club. Think of all those matches that he missed when they were paying that immense salary for him not to be in the squad because of what happened under Erik ten Hag. He impressed at Borussia Dortmund on loan. He did well in spells at Chelsea. I think, in a way, it's worked for all parties, because there is still a market value there for Jadon Sancho. United, they are expecting offers for him in this transfer window. It's understood a number of clubs in the Premier League and Europe have approached Jadon Sancho's representatives about what the conditions of the deal could look like. I think there is a preference from all parties, Jadon Sancho and Manchester United, for this chapter to officially come to a close this summer. But you can't rule out another loan deal, potentially, in this window. If clubs aren't going to be willing to match those wages, and let's be honest, over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, has Jadon Sancho merited the wages that he's expecting this window? That's a conversation to be had. It's worth pointing out here, there's no suggestion this would be the case, but Ruben Amorim hasn't had a chance to work this footballer yet, because he left before he came in.
Good point.
I'm not suggesting he could be integrated, but there could be a situation where if they can't get rid of him, he's on those wages, then they have to get him involved in their plans, because it is costing United a serious amount of money to have a player like that not doing anything if they can't get rid of him. Very early on this transfer window, we understand United are expecting offers, but definitely one to bear in mind.
All right, so what we do know is that Chelsea may have wanted him, but they've given him back. If they don't want Jadon Sancho, do they want Jamie Gittens?
And there's an interesting link there as well, because he's at Borussia Dortmund. Actually, Jamie Gittens was at Chelsea as a child. Spent a bit of time there as a child as well.
Grew up City, wasn't he?
In Reading, yeah, and he went from City to Borussia Dortmund, and he was really impressive. He broke records in the Champions League earlier on this season. Chelsea are considering to make a move to sign him in this window. There was interest in January, didn't quite happen. Just 20 years of age, a target in January, but there's around 8 or 9 different attacking wide players Chelsea are looking at in this transfer window. Valued at around £50 million from Borussia Dortmund. Was a first-team player for the first half of this season. He scored 11 goals before mid-January, just 1 since then. He's not quite fit in under the new manager. He's been left frustrated, so you can understand why this would be something that could happen this summer. But Jamie Gittens certainly is a player who's a target for Chelsea. We wait to see if that materialises in terms of a concrete bid and an offer.
Our chief correspondent, Kaveh Solokol, weeks and weeks ago said Chelsea are going to be busy. They're going to go for a centre-back, they're going to go for a striker and a wide player. Didn't mention a goalkeeper, but let's mention a goalkeeper. Maignan being linked. Is he going?
Well, this deal looks like it could definitely get done. There's a really good chance that it could happen. And what's very interesting here, Mark spoke before about the Chelsea wage structure and the way they've looked to attack this window and previous windows, getting players in young on long contracts. Well, this doesn't quite fit in with that. The French number 1, Maignan, 29 years of age, arguably regarded as one of the best goalkeepers in the world. Chelsea already have a number of goalkeepers. They've got the likes of Kepa that are coming back following his loan spell at Bournemouth at the end of this season. But it is felt like an area that they can make an upgrade. I've spoken to Enzo Maresca a few times this season. He's always defended his goalkeepers. He's already defended the likes of Rob Sanchez and Philip Jorgensen. But it's felt from afar that that's an area that Chelsea can improve, despite the fact this doesn't quite fit in with their project in terms of signing players very young. They had the youngest average age of a squad in the Premier League last season. But this could be a serious upgrade to what they have right now.
Yeah, all right, we're going to take a break. So much to fit in. We've talked about Chelsea because they're going to the Club World Cup. What about Manchester City? They're getting busy. They're off to the Club World Cup. We heard from the boss. He said, we've got signings in mind. We're going to get them done. We'll talk about City next. See you in a moment. And the fact that they don't want Jadon Sancho. How has this situation come about?
Yeah, well, obviously, Jadon Sancho was a key player for Chelsea last season. 31 appearances in the Premier League, 7 goals and assists, and he was on loan from Manchester United. But there was an obligation inserted into that contract that Chelsea could activate for £25 million. There was no loan fee, crucially, for Jadon Sancho going to Chelsea. But Chelsea are paying Manchester United £5 million not to buy Jadon Sancho. And I can see the way you're looking at me there, Mike. You're going, well, hang on a second. What's going on there? Quite simply, Jadon Sancho's representative spoke to Chelsea about potentially joining permanently. But because Manchester United were paying around 50% of his wages to play for Chelsea, he had to fit in to their wage structure, which would have potentially meant him taking a rather hefty pay cut to sign permanently for Chelsea. So therefore, they couldn't find some common ground with regards to that deal. So Chelsea said, thanks very much. We'll pay the penalty in the contract and we're going to be sending you back to Manchester United. Now, this is a player that has a lot of interest from around Europe and crucially started the big games at the end of the season and, of course, the Europa Conference League final. So no question he's got quality and ability, but wage is the stumbling block. And Chelsea just said, on this occasion, we're going to send you.
Mark's bigging him up, James. But did he do enough at Chelsea to have a lot of options now?
Well, I think there were really promising stages at the very beginning and right at the very end with that goal against Real Betis last week in the Conference League, which just showed what he can do and what we were used to seeing at Borussia Dortmund. It's something we've not seen a huge amount from Jadon Sancho in the Premier League, either at Chelsea or at Manchester United. But Enzo Maresca was full of praise for him when he spoke about him in the final few weeks of the season, saying that if we qualify for the Champions League, then it's because of Jadon Sancho. If we win the Conference League, it's because of Jadon Sancho. I think there was a huge amount of credit which he built up there. And as Mark's saying there, I don't think it's a case of Chelsea not willing to spend the £25 million fee. It was more about they couldn't get him to fit within the wage structure. The question you'd have is, were there conversations that took place at the start of last season when this deal was agreed? Because at that point, if Chelsea were to sign him permanently, then that conversation you'd think would have already happened about the fact is, listen, you're on this amount of money now, but if you do sign permanently, you're going to have to take a huge wage cut from what you're on at Manchester United. So I think, as far as United are concerned, there'll be immense frustration because I think at the start of last season they felt that they were able to close a really disappointing chapter with Jadon Sancho. But now this summer they're going to have to try to find a way to get him out of the football club. Perhaps there's a way in which he's integrated under Ruben Amorim, who's not had a chance to work with him, who has no relationship with him whatsoever. Perhaps there is that case. It seems unlikely. I think the preference from all parties, including Jadon Sancho, would be a clean break now. There is still 1 year left on that contract. Let's bear in mind how much money Manchester United have paid Jadon Sancho not to play for their football club. They helped fund his wages at Borussia Dortmund, though, because Borussia Dortmund did so well, it ended up being quite a good deal for Manchester United. But they were still covering some of his wages whilst he was at Chelsea. That's how they made this deal work. They're expecting offers, and a number of clubs in the Premier League and Europe, we understand, have approached Sancho's representatives about what the condition of a deal could look like. As I mentioned, 1 year left on his contract. A loan can't be ruled out at this stage, but ideally there would be a permanent sale. Whether or not Manchester United can get £25 million or not, that felt like quite a fair fee that Chelsea paid. I don't think he did his credentials any huge favours at Chelsea, but I don't think you can write him off. He's still just 25 years of age. There's definitely a player there. He's shown that. But unfortunately at Chelsea, not throughout the whole season. OK. Mark, are there tricky times ahead at United? Uncomfortable times? Because Sancho's gone back. Anthony's going to have to go back. Rashford's going to have to go back. Tricky times?
Yeah, potentially. Let's be honest. There's been a lot of tricky times at Old Trafford over the course of the last few seasons. Things that really aren't going in the way in which Sir Jim Ratcliffe had hoped, the fans have hoped. So they're going to have to make some big decisions. And you've seen that over the course of the last 12 months. You know, there's been a lot of people that have worked at Manchester United that have lost their jobs. There's going to have to be big decisions made with regards to some of those players you've mentioned about the football side of things. And Sir Jim Ratcliffe has quite openly said, look, we cannot afford to keep operating in the way we have been. We have to trim costs. We have to be more sustainable. We have to be careful. We have to get our investment right. And when you look at those players, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, Anthony, best part of £1 million a week there that's going to be potentially not involved in that first team if Ruben Amorim doesn't step in and say, actually, clean slate, these boys can play for me and they can prove that they're Manchester United players over the course of pre-season. And if they do that, no problem. However, you get the feeling that the accountants might just be leaning in and saying, actually, we could do with lifting him off the wage bill. He represents 100% pure profit for PSR. So therefore, actually, our favourite situation would be that these depart the football club. And that's where they're going to have to find suitors. And that's the problem. Because is someone going to pay £40 million for Marcus Rashford? Is someone going to get close to the £80 million that they paid for Anthony? He's just been on loan at Real Betis. So therefore, Manchester United are probably going to have to accept we're going to lose some money, but how much can we afford to lose and how much do we want to lose? And of course, wages, another problem. James has mentioned it there. When you're on £300,000 a week and someone offers you 150, you're going to say, actually, I'm not going to leave Manchester United. So then United have got to be clever and creative and say, well, we'll make up the difference for you to go.
Yeah, interesting. We'll have much more on United to come, but I want to go back to Chelsea, James. Liam Delap, where are we with this one?
Well, Chelsea is set to announce the signing shortly. They've activated his £30 million release clause at Ipswich. Plenty of suitors for Liam Delap, but he's decided he wants Chelsea because of their style of play, because of a relationship he already has with Enzo Maresca, the quality of the squad, the ambition, the project that Chelsea are building right now, and the likelihood he feels of Chelsea challenging for major trophies. We're talking about the Premier League and the Champions League over the course of the next few seasons. Chelsea want him in their squad in time to play in this Club World Cup, which starts in a fortnight, which means he wouldn't be available to play for England under 21s. But in terms of that announcement, we're expecting that very shortly. OK. After the Sancho deal fell through for Chelsea, is Jamie Gittens the answer? Yeah, it's something they explored in January. It's something they're going to look at exploring once again. There's 8 or 9 attacking players that Chelsea are looking at in this transfer window. When it comes to Gittens, there's real similarities with Jadon Sancho. There's the Borussia Dortmund connection. There's actually the connection that they already had with Gittens, because he actually was there as a child, even before the academy days, a very, very young player. So he signed for Borussia Dortmund from Manchester City at a very young age. Really impressed in the first half of this season. He broke the Champions League record in terms of being a young goal scorer for Borussia Dortmund. Scored 11 goals before January, but after that, a new manager came in, didn't feature as much, was a first-team player, didn't get as many starts. I think he was frustrated with what happened in the back end of the season. We understand a deal would be around £50 million, a significant transfer fee, but for a player who clearly has a lot of potential, a wide player, and Chelsea clearly do need wide players now because there won't be Sancho there next season. We'll wait and see what happens with Mykhailo Mudryk as well.
Let's go to the other end of the pitch, Mark. If you listen to many a pundit, they've said Chelsea aren't going to win anything until they change their goalkeeper. It looks like they're doing something about that. Talk us through the Mike Maignan deal. Yeah,
Mike Maignan, France #1. Very different profile to what Chelsea have done over the last few windows. He's 29 years old, so he is a ready-made product to go into that first team. He's not a young player that they can develop and mould and create into what they want. So he is a finished article. We understand that Chelsea are currently in talks with AC Milan over a potential deal for Maignan. He's got just 1 year left on his AC Milan contract, and there's a confidence that Chelsea can get the deal done. So, yeah, this would be a big one, because I know a lot of Chelsea fans, and like you rightly say, pundits have said over the course of the last couple of windows, last season, if Chelsea get a really top-class, world-class goalkeeper, and that's what Chelsea feel he is, one of the best in the world, then that would be a significant step towards getting them not just into the top 4, but challenging for the Premier League title. So one to keep an eye on, but certainly getting to an advanced stage.
How have Chelsea got themselves into a position to afford bringing players in?
Well, it's
lots of different methods.
Creativity is probably the best way to look at it. They've been looking at every single avenue to maximise income.
Yep, so firstly what they looked to do at the very beginning was in terms of the long contracts they were handing out. Remember, they gave Enzo Fernandez an 8.5-year contract. Mykhailo Mudryk got similar. The rules changed, FIFA changed it, which meant that you could only spread a transfer fee across 5 years, but Chelsea initially took advantage of that, and still they are handing out long contracts. We'll see that of Liam Delap as well. Spreading that £30 million fee across 5 years works out at £6 million per year. And then one thing we saw them do, which drew quite a lot of criticism from Chelsea fans, but I think they'll feel vindicated in what they did in the end. The likes of Mason Mount, Conor Gallagher going for significant transfer fees, pure profit when it comes to profit and sustainability rules. Also, the club have sold 2 hotels to another sister company to keep them PSR compliant, and the ownership group also sold the women's team to their parent company. So some of these methods have been used to keep them compliant, which have been outside of transfers. But when you look at their transfers they've done, they'll feel that they're really happy with the squad they've got right now. Yes, it will be a big summer, but they really have overhauled that squad whilst remaining compliant with PSR. Crucially, the performances in the league, finishing 4th and winning the Conference League, means there's even more wiggle room when it comes to PSR, so they can go out and be bold in this transfer window.
They say competing in the Champions League is worth a minimum of 80 million euros. And the fact that they are going to be in the big time, massively important. And that's where Manchester United have missed out, because that windfall is huge, particularly when it comes to signing players. You know, if you get 2-3 players for 100 million, but you haven't got that 100 million, it completely changes the dynamic of what you do in a transfer window. And that's where Chelsea have done well on the pitch this season. But like James says, you've got to keep winning. You've got to get in the Champions League. You've got to get to the latter stages of the competitions, because it makes such a massive difference to the balance sheet.
As Mark says, United missed out on that, but it doesn't look like they're going to miss out on Brian Mbeumo. He looks like...
Hi, good evening and welcome to SportLab. You're watching the Transfer Show. We're here to bring you all the latest updates from day 3 of this early summer transfer window. With 1 week left for clubs to get their deals done, we've got plenty to cover, including some big moves and insider news. First up, Manchester United's captain Bruno Fernandes is staying put, turning down a huge offer from Saudi Arabia to be part of the club's rebuild. We'll hear why Bruno is committed to the Premier League despite lucrative offers abroad. We'll speak to Jadon Sancho himself about his unexpected return to Manchester United from Chelsea, a move that's got everyone talking. Chelsea, meanwhile, are busy too. They're being linked with some top talent, including one of Europe's best goalkeepers. We'll break down what this means for their squad. Here you'd put the detailed discussion you shared: Bruno Fernandes' decision, potential sales, Jadon Sancho's situation, Chelsea's plans, and so on. That's all for this edition of the Transfer Show. Thanks for tuning in to SportLab, your go-to for all the latest football transfer news. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update. We'll be back with more exclusive interviews and breaking news. Until then, enjoy the evening and stay sporty.